to disseminate knowledge and information. And we expect that knowledge and information will make impact. So we do not believe that you should bury your head and pray for manna without knowledge. So that's the purpose of the many things that we do. This economic outlook, Nigerian economic outlook, being one of them. In October, we also had the Kingdom Summit, and Kingdom Summit will come again. All our speakers are on time. We want to specially thank Dr. Doyin Salami because he had to do a lot of things in his calendar to get him here this morning. And he has promised, please put your hands together for him. And he has asked me to see him when he comes back from his assignment, that there are many other things we can do as a follow-up to this event to achieve the impact we want to make in people's lives. He's somebody that always intrigues me at every interaction that I have with him. In order for us to get on time, I will call on our pastor, our leader, Pastor Ben, to give us a formal opening of this event.
Thank you, Deji. As I was listening to Deji speak, I was wondering what more there was for me to say by way of an opening remarks. Nevertheless, where I come from, if you ever get up in a gathering and say, they have said all there is to say, all I wanted to say, they consider you a fool. And since I don't want to be considered a fool this morning, I'm going to add a few. Essentially, it has explained to us why we do, why we do this. And it's something that is basically at our very core. We believe that God doesn't do things without a purpose. And there's a purpose for God locating us right here in the foremost central business district in Nigeria. I'm sure you know this is not just the foremost central business district in Lagos, but in Nigeria. And we'll give even Santon in South Africa some competition. So we believe, therefore, as a church, that we must give back to the community in which we, operate. And so this is one way by which we give back, and that's why these events are really non-fee, paying. But even more so, also, we believe in the pursuit of knowledge. God, the Bible tells us, is a God of knowledge. Okay? And our God is a God of knowledge. And our God requires us to be wise, to operate with wisdom. And wisdom, as they say, wisdom is defined as the right application of knowledge. But for you to therefore be wise, you must first have knowledge. It's the right application of that knowledge that makes you wise. And the starting point, therefore, if you want to be wise, is to, seek, knowledge. But as we gather, here occasionally to seek, knowledge, ultimately we believe that knowledge to be effective, we must, of course, add the God factor in it. There's a man called Moses, one of the heroes of the Bible. Moses spent 120 years on this earth, and his life was broken into 3 distinct parts. In the first 40 years of his life, Moses was raised in the courts of Pharaoh. Egypt then was the leading nation of the world. So, as being raised as Pharaoh's grandson, entitled him to the best education available in Egypt. In essence, the best education the world could offer. And so in the first 40 years of his life, he developed that worldly knowledge, the knowledge of whatever the education system could offer, the world could offer. And then, when he was 40, something happened. Since this is not a Bible class, I won't get into details of what happened. But he spent the next 40 years of his life, as the Bible says, in the backside of the desert, learning spiritual things. And so 40 years, adding the knowledge, worldly knowledge, 40 years spiritual knowledge. And by the time he was 80, he was ready for the assignment that God had for him. And he spent the third 40 years of his life, actually then doing that assignment. Most of us aren't going to be that lucky to spend 120 years on earth. So don't plan on 40. But you can take it all along. It's a principle to life. So you get this knowledge. Never forget the knowledge of God and, the fear of him. And so the Bible tells us in Proverbs 1 verse 7, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. He said, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. The fact that you're here today already takes you out of that category of fools, because it means you do not despise wisdom and instruction. And that's why you've taken time out this Saturday morning, nice and early, to be here. And for those of us, members of the Redeemed Christian Church of God, the 50-day fast begins today. So for some of such people coming out here this morning without their regular cup or something or whatever, or whatever, their ogi or moi or whatever, may have even made it doubly difficult for them. But I congratulate you for coming out here. I look forward to a really engaging session. We couldn't have hoped for any better, keynote speaker today. Indeed, it's a great privilege that we have today to be able to have Dr. Doyin Salami to be here with us today. All I'm just going to add, most of you know him, and so I'm not going to be the typical Nigerian who says somebody doesn't need an introduction and spends 30 minutes introducing the person who doesn't need introduction. In any case, technology will help us, introduce him. But all I want to say is, if you like what he says today, give me the credit. If you don't like it, blame him. Amen. And please let me liberate all of us from the burden of protocols today. Okay? We'll be extremely light on protocols. In fact, 0 on protocols. We just want to get business done. Hopefully, we will gain time and be ahead of time today. Once again, it's my pleasure to welcome you, and I'm sure that you will have a fulfilling time here today.
Dr. Doyin Salami is the chairman Presidential Economic Advisory Council. He's also a senior fellow, associate professor, and member of the faculty at the Lagos Business School, Pan Atlantic University, and CEO Kainos Edge. In November 2017, he completed an 8-year stint as a member of the Central Bank of Nigeria's Monetary Policy Committee and was a member of the federal government's economic management team. His consulting clients have included Equatorial Africa, Department for International Development (DFID), World Bank, United Nations Industrial Development Organization, and United States Agency for International Development (USAID). Dr. Salami also served as peer reviewer for the International Finance Corporation's review of its Nigeria strategy. He is a 1989 doctorate degree graduate in economics of Queen Mary College, University of London.
Right. A very good morning to you, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, and a very happy new year to you. I don't think it's too late to say that, and my prayer is that may this be the best year yet for you, your families, and everything associated with you. I must, place on record my thanks to Pastor Ben, even though as I have accused him of mischief, because given my current assignment, I now need to be more cheerful, more positive, more optimistic about the way in which I see things. In other words, today, the cup will be half full and not half empty. But I don't think that is in itself a bad thing anyway, because if I am speaking about the theme, which is unlocking economic opportunities or unlocking opportunities in the Nigerian economy, then that in itself is a very positive titling. Why? It speaks to opportunity. But let us not then get carried away by thinking that because we speak about opportunities, that the process of achieving opportunity is going to be easy. Irrespective of what I say to you today, irrespective of how we paint the canvas, your ability in 2020 to be successful is going to depend on you. Let me repeat that. Your ability to be successful in 2020 is going to be dependent on you. When I heard the intro that was given to me, and very kind, thank you. In fact, I will request a copy to send to my father. See, this is what I spent the last 30 years doing. But as I listened to that intro, the only thing that they didn't say, and which is the way I actually usually introduce myself, is when they say, "Who am I?" I say, I am simply an economist from Ijebu-Ode. Now, that immediately conjures up all manner of imagination. But we'll pass on that. But why do I like that? Because it always reminds me of a I don't know whether to call it an adage, which I will try and translate. I will set it out first in Yoruba, and then I will try and do what essentially is a literal translation, which is going to be very horrendous, but we'll try. Because it says in Yoruba, "Ton ba n gúnyán nú ewé, ton sebẹ̀ nínú èpo ẹ̀pà, ẹni máa yó, máa yó." I will repeat it in Yoruba. Ton ba n gúnyán nú ewé, ton se ọbẹ̀ nínú èpo ẹ̀pà, ẹni máa yó, máa yó. In a sense, it's a bit fatalistic, but let me translate it and then I will discuss it and then open up my conversation around opportunity. Imagine, and that is what it's saying. Ton ba n gúnyán, I'm sure, I don't need to tell you what that says. Pounded yam is iyán. So if you're pounding yam, it says, "Ton ba n gúnyán nú ewé." So imagine these broad banana leaves. And you set it up, put cooked yam on it, and start pounding it with a pestle. I dare say that at the first blow, the leaves will give way. So in almost saying that one is almost an impossible condition, to pound yam for transformation into pounded yam, not in a mortar. As I'm sure you all know, you've seen this done. It doesn't matter where you're coming from. That's an impossibility, to pound yam in a leaf or on a leaf for transformation into pounded yam. Ain't gonna happen. They then further complicate it and say, "Ton ba n se ọbẹ̀ nínú èpo ẹ̀pà." I'm sure when I say ọbẹ̀, you all know, but it's stew, soup, whatever. Again, ẹ̀pà is groundnut. The shell of a groundnut. How do you cook stew in the shell of a groundnut? Forget about how small it is to begin with, but the nature, the texture of groundnut shell cannot allow you to put it on fire. So again, a second impossibility. But the elders go on to a conclusion which seems to be unreasonable. That even in spite of this combination of impossibilities, why was this activity going on? It's going on for feeding, to feed somebody, to prepare a meal. That notwithstanding these impossibilities, those who will eat to satisfaction will eat to satisfaction. And so, the first thing, and which is where I start, is that if you're going to eat to satisfaction, there are a number of personal characteristics that are imperative. Yes, the first, Deji has already mentioned. If we're going to be praying, can we be praying with some knowledge, with some understanding? It's important. Second, you need to act. That's already implied in what Deji said in his opening, that there's no point facing God in prayer and doing nothing. Activity is imperative. Thirdly, persistence is imperative. So we run into trouble and we give up. And you're not going to get very far. Indeed, I remember a business school definition of entrepreneurship or successful entrepreneurship. It's about falling down 7 times and getting up 8 times, because it's on that 8th occasion that success is achieved. But persistence is imperative. What else? Only 2 other things I will add. I'm sure you will add other things for yourselves that suit your own personal circumstances. But beyond knowledge, activity, persistence is realism. There's no point sitting down in cuckoo land trying to achieve things for which you have no skill. trying to achieve circumstances that you cannot bring about, simply because that is your dream. And I tell people, you must pursue your dream, but even dreams can be phased. Where we start on the basis of what's available, we're clear where we're going. But we must also be clear about how to get there pragmatically and realistically. Persistence, pragmatism. But the part that I'm going to come back to is continuous self-development. The world and the environment in which you're trying to unlock opportunity is a dynamic one. Too many people that I see are not dynamic in a dynamic environment. What happens? The environment passes them by. Let me repeat. You need to be dynamic. You cannot. When they say to people, learning is a lifelong activity, most people, I don't think, understand it. And by the way, when we say learning, we are getting to a world today where it's not even about certified learning anymore. It's about your ability to demonstrate capacity. A young friend came to see me not too long ago and said to me, boss, he's an engineer, works for a global multinational. They'd given him an assignment which was not in his area, but expected him to be able to do it. And he came to me and said, okay, it's an assignment in finance, can you help me? Unfortunately, I was tied up. And I said, look, you'd have to come back in about 3 or 4 days. He says, sorry, I have this assignment to deliver by the end of tomorrow. Sorry, nothing I can do, but I'll put you in touch with someone. So I put him in touch. It didn't go well. But guess what he did? Simply went online, looked for a course that dealt with the matter. And by the following day, he picked up, I think he said, 4 hours of learning and was able to discharge the assignment. He did. When he sent me what he did, even I had to bow. What am I saying? That the world, and it's one of the trends that I will discuss, the world is increasingly open, but it is only open to those who are interested in access. The world is increasingly open, but it is only open to those who are interested in continuous self-development and who want access. You do, you get it. You don't, you won't get it. You've got to have an activity. You do something in order to access a result. The days, if ever they were, when you could do nothing and get something, long, long gone. Okay. Having said that about the responsibilities that you have to yourself, let me now try and speak to unlocking opportunities in Nigeria in 2020. Anybody who's heard me speak before will know that typically I try and break a topic down either into questions or into a group of sub-themes so that it's easy for me to walk through them. And for me, if you're talking about opportunity, unlocking opportunity, then there are 3 questions or 3 sub-themes that I think you need to pay attention to, have regard for. The first is, what is the nature of opportunity that's available? In other words, where do we find these opportunities? The second is, what is the surround sound? What are those things that kind of define how the opportunity is going to evolve? And as I said earlier, opportunity itself is positive, but that is not to say that there are no risks around opportunity. And so what are those challenges to taking advantage of opportunity? Those are the kind of 3 things to which I will speak this morning. Let me start. Somebody said to me this morning, I hope you are not going to give us theory and lecture. And I was laughing. That, well, since they chose to invite a university academic, even though he's a public policy maker, then sorry. Frameworks are inevitable in doing this matter. And so, let me, in my reflection as an economist over the last 20, 30 years, a couple of things have become clearer to me. Yes, I teach, but I consult. Where are you likely to find opportunity? My view is that there are about 6, if you're looking, there are 6 things to look out for. The first, where is the largest amount of activity taking place in the environment that you're in? Repeat, where is the largest amount of activity taking place? For those who are economists or interested in economics, how do you measure that? Just look for the largest economic sectors. Just look for the largest economic sectors. And by the way, Nigeria has 6 large sectors. Of these, in total, Nigeria has 46 sectors. But 6 of them are roughly 3/4 of the economy. The largest, by any stretch of the imagination, is agriculture. That's about 24% of Nigeria's economy. The second largest is trading. So when people say we're a nation of traders, they're not that far wrong, because agriculture is about 17% of the Nigerian economy. The third is manufacturing. It's not as large as it needs to be. Nigeria's manufacturing sector is about 10% of her economy, and some people like myself take a view that if we are going to create the jobs, the volume of jobs, look, let me put something on the table now that is both an advantage and a disadvantage depending on how you play or how we play it as a nation. We are told that over the next 20 years or thereabouts, in fact, about 30 years, 2050, that Nigeria will have a population of 400 million. One thing that is clear about Nigeria's population numbers, you may doubt it, but one thing that seems to be clear, the population census have been disputed almost since time immemorial. 1953 was disputed, 63 was disputed, 76 was disputed, 2006 was disputed. Indeed, I usually argue that even Lagos, where we are, the population figure is uncertain. Why? Because the 2006 population census, 14 of the 20 local governments in Lagos were invalidated by the population tribunal that was set up then. There were complaints and the tribunal invalidated the figures. But irrespective of all of that, it appears Nigeria's population doubles almost every 30 years. And so the way we are looking at it is saying by 2050, 411 million is the figure the UN has put out and which many people are working with. And so if you're looking at that, how many jobs must you create to keep a 400 million strong population, largely millennials, satisfied? That's something I'm going to come to. So, which are the largest sectors? As I've said, agric is the largest, followed by distribution. That is followed by followed by manufacturing, and then that is followed by telecoms, technology. Then we now come to oil and gas, and then you now come to real estate. Those are the 6 biggest sectors of the economy. Between them, as I said, 75% of this economy. So if you're looking for where the opportunity, where is the largest amount of activity? Second, where is most new investment heading? Remember what I said, where is most new investment heading? And that you will find by simply asking the question, which are the fastest growing sectors of the Nigerian economy? Indeed, one of the fastest growing these days turns out to be non-oil mining. A second turns out to be the utilities sector. Now, many of these are fast growing because they are coming from a very low base. The economists or the statisticians would call that a base effect. The third thing to look out for is which are those sectors that are resilient to economic shocks? If you don't like taking risk, which sectors are the most resilient? And guess what? Agriculture, indeed, production, crop production is either the first or the second most resilient. And the reason is not very simple. Sorry, the amount of credit that goes into it is not that large. A lot of the money that you find in agriculture is private capital, non-debt private capital. Indeed, when you look at the books of financial institutions, debt in agriculture, or agricultural debt to the banking system is probably about 5-6% in total. How do people spend money? Because where they spend money is what creates opportunity that firms, those who are interested in business, try to meet. And indeed, one of the things that I've found is that is evolving. In 2003, the average Nigerian spent 64% of their income on food and non-alcoholic beverages in 2003. By 2009, that figure had dropped to 51. The latest figures, there hasn't been a revision of that basket since 2009, but my understanding is we're likely to get a new set of figures in the course of this year. But my team did a small piece in 2018 looking at Lagos and Rivers states. And we found the change significant. In Lagos, only 28% of income goes on food and non-alcoholic beverages. Only 28. In Rivers, it's a bit higher. It's about 32. Even though we had no figures for northern Nigeria, but my sense is even that 51, 52 that I spoke of in 2009 has come down. In other words, notwithstanding the recession, Nigeria is increasingly moving from subsistence, where people are spending money to keep body and soul together, into drifting gently, not rapidly enough, but gently into lifestyle. Indeed, one of the things we discovered, and I was personally shocked, was that in Lagos, in 2018, as high as 11% of the budget of households is spent eating out. As high as 11% is spent eating out. Now, when I saw the figures first, I challenged it. No, come on. But think about it carefully, by the way. Even Lagos Island, Isaleku, just drive there any given night. Tables all over the place, people selling indomie and rice and noodles and egg and tea and... Sorry, that is eating out. As long as the food is not cooked by you in your house, you don't have to go to any of the big brands. There are unbranded varieties that are available. Very generic. But believe me, there's a particular place on Kefi Street where bread and akara, I am a regular patron of this establishment. And believe me, it's one of the best. Now, so how people spend their money is important. But beyond how they spend their money, it's important to have a sense for national priorities and national deficiencies. Because, remember I said, opportunity is itself positive. And to that extent, therefore, what we are talking about, the fact that there's a deficiency, in my view, makes it an opportunity. What you've got to figure out is, why is that deficiency lasting? And are there ways by which those hindrances can be overcome? So when you look at in Nigeria today, there are many things that are deficiencies. Power, healthcare, education. Indeed, something that I failed to tell you, in Rivers State, 15% of their income is spent on education. In Lagos State, 10% of their income is spent on education. And so, these deficiencies, what are deficiencies, in my view, also constitute opportunities. If Nigeria is going to meet the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030, then national policy is going to have to focus on them. And indeed, one of the, for me, cheering things in this last year or so is the creation of the Humanitarian Affairs Ministry. Because now you have a ministry that focused on essentially this. Before I move on, there are two other things to add in terms of where to find opportunities. I just said now, national priorities. The Africa Continental Free Trade Area Agreement is a major opportunity if Nigerians are interested. It's access to a market in excess of 1 billion people. And before you say, oh, we're not competitive, yeah, we do have our problems. But guess what? Nigeria's manufacturing is the number 4 most diversified on the continent. So we've got a base on which we can build. A big question, which I will pose later on, is Nigeria's view to take external advantage, or is Nigeria's view going to remain largely import substitution? These two are very different views of the world and how you move. But the final thing I will put on this particular dimension is, I've said a lot of things that are like helicopter views. You may be in a sector and you say, this sector is not doing very well. I suggest to you that increasingly we take a value chain approach to assessing sectors. So let me give you an example. If you take agriculture, agriculture's value chain is in 4 parts. There is a pre-production, which is where your fertilizer, your seeds, and the like are to be found. There are your production, which is where, yes, we know, small-scale subsistence, rain-fed farming, largely. But increasingly, we are now seeing mechanized agribusinesses showing up, increasingly. The third is the processing sector. I was doing a study just this last week on rice costs. What's happening? How come, as I am told, I'm not a farmer of rice nor a processor, but how come paddy, I am told, leaves the farm at 4,000 naira per ton and ends up in rice at about between 17 and 20,000 per ton? Okay. And I'm like, okay, what's happened here? But one of the key bottlenecks is the lack of processing capacity. Yes, we are producing paddy, but the capacity to process it rapidly. Indeed, somebody to whom we spoke says his own capacity is X, but as of the date we were speaking, has a 50 trailer line waiting for access. So imagine the demurrage costs. So you can begin to understand that. And that's why I say granularity, value chains. And of course, the 4th part of the value chain in agriculture is the trading value chain. No matter, I'm looking at all of you, no matter how young you are, all of you look to me to be post-secondary school. If you don't know anything, you know that Nigeria's agriculture is seasonal. Once the harvest season passes, prices are only headed in one direction, up. Now, if I say go and trade beans now, all of you look at me, you have gone to university, you have done this, yeah, but even though I now these days spend much of my time and earn my income speaking decent English, but many years ago, I used to sell motor spare parts. I worked with my father. many years ago, tried to sell sesame seeds, not even out of Nigeria, but out of Uganda. Many years ago, tried to sell beans. Just shows you how useless an entrepreneur I am. But many of my colleagues who did similar have been astounding successes simply because they understood the fundamental principle. You buy when it is cheap, you pay the storage cost, you dry it properly, you keep it. When the price goes up, you sell it. Now, you may come back and say, oh, there are working capital requirements, blah, blah, blah. People will always have excuses. But one of the things I keep telling those who find these nice excuses to give to me is that, have you ever tried collaboration? One of the things that makes people fail in this environment is that we don't trust ourselves. And therefore, we can't collaborate. And because we can't collaborate, we can't individually have the resources that are required. Hence, opportunities go a-begging. We then sit down and say, foreigners have come and taken opportunities. And yet, when the opportunities were unchallenged, we didn't take them. And so, these 5-6 things should give you a framework that helps you understand where should I be looking for opportunity. Now, what is then the context in which these opportunities are to be found? This context is going to be shaped by 2 sets of factors. In other words, the environment of opportunity is going to be shaped by 2 sets of factors. Some are domestic, some are international. Let me deal with the international ones because we have no control over them. But these international ones, I divide up into 2 broad buckets. Bucket 1, these are the short-term things that buffet us on a regular basis. And there are 4 things inside the short-term factors. Number 1, what's international policy like? And international policy is in 3 dimensions: regulatory policy, fiscal policy, monetary policy. As of today, the key interest in the world is monetary policy. Today, what we are seeing easing as the world fears a slowing down of growth. The second key factor internationally is the international trading environment. So there is international policy, there is international trading, and Nigeria is most impacted by international trading conditions. If nothing at all, our oil is an international commodity, the price of which we have no control over, and if we don't maintain domestic security, even our control over production begins to slip. International capital movements are the third international factor. And by the way, one of the things that amazes me, when we talk and we say international investors don't come to Nigeria, those who come on a short-term basis, I always say, do we ask ourselves, what is the nature of the international capital that's out there that we could attract? Do we understand what it takes to attract it? And are we ready to do same? Let me put something on the table for you to consider. As of November 2019, there was roughly $17 trillion, $17 trillion of investment in negative yield assets around the world. In other words, the moment you put your money in, you know that what you are getting back is going to be lower than what you put in. So you put $100 in, you are guaranteed less than $100. And yet, there is $17 trillion of international investment there. And yet, Nigeria, on fixed income alone, is 12-14%. We're told that corporate profitability, even though it is now slipping, is somewhere around about 14-17%, depending on sector. And so you're asking yourself, so what is it about us that means we are unable, or is it that we are unwilling to do what needs to be done to gain access to international capital. And by the way, let me put this also contextually so that you understand this. Nigeria is actually a capital deficient country. And I will use two examples. First example, all the stock of available capital, everything, amounts to about 48% of GDP. So if GDP is about 420 billion, so you're looking at the stock of bank loan, FX, government, financial markets, everything, coming to just under 200 billion. The African average, last time I checked, was about 105. Indeed, countries like Switzerland, which some of you are patrons of, have a capital depth of 3,000% of GDP. And so, if you're capital deficient, then you've got to figure out how do you unlock access to capital? How do you raise capital? That's number one. Number two, just think about this. Nigeria's infrastructure master plan, fortunately, even though you call him Pastor Ben, I call him DG Budget Officer of the Federation. Today, both of us are going to end up in trouble. But if you look, our infrastructure needs, on the basis of our own master plan, not anybody's imposed master plan, is $100 billion every year for 3 decades. 3 trillion over 30 years. Add all the federal, state budgets together, all. It's about $57 billion. We don't yet know what the 2020 budget, but the 2019 budget was about $57 billion. So what is that saying? Sack all the civil servants, gather all the money, state, federal, everybody, local government, everybody, put it in infrastructure. You will only do, and by the way, you must spend the money very efficiently. It's not the one where we'll be complaining that it is taking X number of years to finish a railway. It is taking X number of naira to finish a road. No. Efficiently. Global standards. You will only do half of what is needed in 1 year. So in the second year, you will carry over. And so the gap keeps expanding. And yet, if we have ambitions of becoming a global superpower, which we can be, then we have to begin to figure out how do we fix these capital deficiency issues. Okay. Diaspora transfers. Again, we need to understand it. The last figure I saw says Nigerians transferred $25 billion into the country. Okay, how? What volume comes through the banks? We need to understand the characterization. And the reason is not that I'm doubting it's 25 or not. I'm not interested in that. What I'm more interested in is there a way that we can channel this into building parts of the economy? Countries, Mexico, Chile, to a smaller extent, Brazil, have built significant portions of their economy on diaspora transfers from the United States. What lessons can we learn? Indeed, one of the funny things for Nigeria is that when you say, $25 billion, everybody is running. A friend of mine in the UK called me and said, come, what's going on in Nigeria? He has received at least 3 requests that they want to set up a diaspora fund for Nigerians in the diaspora. And the two of us couldn't help laughing because 5 years ago we had spent a lot of time on trying to understand what it would take, and we knew that nobody was going to be able to do it, at least not immediately. In terms of the longer-term issues that are going to drive things and which you must begin to think about, first of all, global demographics. By 2030, there will be 1 billion more people on Earth. Secondly, urbanization. Like everywhere else, Nigeria is seeing an increased level of urbanization. Thirdly, there is a climate crisis. We're all familiar with the bushfires in Australia. We're all familiar with earthquakes all over the place. We're all familiar with flooding in Nigeria. Everybody waited for Harmattan this year, and it appeared it wasn't showing up. Indeed, it rained in December. seemingly unheard of. Climate crisis will create resource pressures. These resource pressures will lead, in my view, and in the view of others, to a greater adoption of what we call circular production. In other words, recycling. We will have to reuse, less and less of things will come from virgin sources. It will have to be remanufactured, recycled, reused of a lot of what we are already producing. Just think about Nigeria. I said to you, by 2050, 411 million people. Abi? Area is unchanged. Just under 1 million square kilometers. Population density doubles. So, how are you going to feed people? Indeed, a friend asked me, if you're forward-looking, what would you invest in? I said, I know what I'd invest in. Very, very simply, land where water passes through. Why? If there are 400 million people in 2050, you got to feed them. If you're going to feed them, agriculture cannot continue on the current basis. Indeed, one of the biggest resources that will come under pressure globally is water. In 1989, I was a PhD student. I had just completed my PhD, and my treat to myself for completing my PhD was a trip to Victoria Falls. It was exquisite. You should see the magic of water. I had the opportunity recently to see a videotape of the Victoria Falls, and I honestly could not believe it. It hardly trickled. Indeed, I'd been romanticizing in my head. Come, in 89, I went to Victoria Falls as a student. It was a fun trip. I ought to go back again. But as I saw the video clips, I'm like, oh boy, this doesn't look like where you will have the same amount of fun. So water, desalination, water-based technologies or technologies around water are going to be increasingly important globally, even if they tell us that by virtue of climate-related challenges, Lagos is one of the 6 cities most at risk in the world. Well, not Lagos, more like this neighborhood and those that are close to it. Indeed, those of us who are now investing in real estate are investing on the mainland, waiting for you guys to come across the bridge. The convergence of technology is also going to be massive. Today we speak about the 4th Industrial Revolution. But we are going to increasingly speak about big data, speak about artificial intelligence, speak about robotics. We are going to increasingly speak about renewable energy. And the question is, are we as a country, and indeed as individuals looking for opportunity? Please remember, they say unlocking opportunities in Nigeria in 2020. I would actually like to say, you know what, Nigerians must unlock opportunity in Nigeria, but we must also seek to be part of the global game that is being played outside Nigeria, but taking advantage from Nigeria. The technology industry in Nigeria, you're seeing what young coders are doing. You're seeing what Google and the international technology behemoths are doing, locating in Nigeria because they see the opportunities that Nigerian youth present. So there's nothing to say we cannot be part of these global games while sitting in Nigeria. But then, of course, you'd have to persuade state governors that rights of access for internet is actually to the benefit of everybody rather than the, shall we say, rights of access fees that they get. Indeed, I was asking myself a few weeks back that what if, where is the fastest internet on the continent? Does anybody know? On this continent. Did somebody say Nigeria? It's actually in Madagascar. Okay, prophecy. So 30 years from now. But just imagine if Lagos, if Abuja, perhaps Port Harcourt, had the fastest internet on the continent, imagine the kinds of international businesses that by virtue of that alone would come locate. We have the advantage of language, by the way. And so, some of these international things, when I talk about technology and the convergence of technology, the convergence, it's going to be convergence and connectivity. The Internet of Things. Many years ago, when I traveled, there's a friend whose place I use. And being a boy from the bush, he wasn't home. And I said, "Guy, this your house is too cold." So he said, "Okay." So I'm like, "What do I do?" He said, "Okay, don't worry. What's going to happen is I'll change the settings for you." "Oh boy, you are in Oman." He says, "Don't worry." And in less than 5 minutes, the house was heating up. I had to call him, "Thank you very kindly, but what happened?" He said, "Don't worry, the heater is connected to this, is connected to that, so I can change the settings anywhere I am." I was just thinking, yeah, actually, you should be able to do that in Lagos. Just, we hope we have light so that the signals can work. Anyway, that's Ben's problem. The final thing that I would put in terms of the global trends is that by 2030, millennials, including Generation Z, will be more than half of the world's working population. In which case, their values and their priorities will predominate. So those of us who say we don't like them, well, they are the people who will determine what happens. On the domestic side, what are going to be the factors that shape the context of opportunity? I'm going to put 4 basic things on the table for your consideration. First, again, international things will. Nigeria is, as of today, fundamentally an oil story. What happens to the international oil market will drive what happens to Nigeria, at least for the next couple of years to come. Of course, if Nigeria, even in oil, questions have to be asked. What do we do in reform terms that enable us to move from exportation of crude to exportation of refined products? It's an important question. And any of you who tries it, just do the numbers. How much do you get per barrel of crude? How much would you get from the yield of a barrel of crude in terms of refined products? You don't need to be a genius. The second thing, in terms of international conditions, is international capital movements. Nigeria does not want to remain at that point where international capital movements are short-term capital movements into Nigeria. It's very difficult on the back of short-term money to make progress. And unfortunately, what we have seen in the last year, 2 years, is a significant diminution of foreign direct investments. That's the kind of investment that builds factories, that hires workers. The FPI that we are seeing, the short term, comes in, earns interest, and goes home. But beyond all of this, the global perception of Nigeria is going to be very, very, very critical. Why do I say this? Yes, before anybody asks me, so Moody's and Fitch have downgraded us. Yep, we've got a revenue challenge. But for me, what is more important is that Nigeria must be seen globally as a safe destination for investment. Let me repeat, a safe destination for investment. In terms of other things that will drive us, the biggest that I'm going to face is reform. Nigeria must continue along the path of reform. And in my view, as much as possible, hasten reform. But that hastening of reform, any of you who's studied mathematics up to a point will have heard of constrained optimization. You're trying to optimize certain outcomes subject to certain constraints. Nigeria's reform must see Nigerians as people and not just as numbers. Why do I say this? We have to be clear where reform activity will impact and how do we not eradicate, but minimize the adverse impacts, especially at the bottom of the pyramid. A lot of us say, oh, you must remove this, you must improve that, but we tend not to think about the impact on the bottom of the pyramid. What are the key challenges or the key areas where I see reform? I already said, even in the oil sector, why are we not producing? Why are we doing crude? Why should we not be doing refined products? You may say, we don't have a refinery. And so why don't we have a refinery? Or we don't have refining capacity, reliable refining capacity. Then we should. As we look, the biggest single area of reform for me is we need to decide what is the role of government. Because then other things follow. And let me quickly, speak to this piece. The role of government, in my view, must be at least three things. First, ensure the security of the environment. Because an insecure environment, we cannot operate. Second, irrespective of your circumstances of birth, you must be able to see and take advantage of opportunity. One of the things that we need to be mindful of that is now happening, and somebody brought it to me forcefully a few days back, that when people like you and I, at least the older persons in this audience, went to school, you met in school people from diverse backgrounds. Today, schools, depending on their fees, essentially are a collection of people of the same background. The more expensive the school, the more it's for the affluent. Please note, I didn't say for the refined. I just said it's for the affluent. And that does not help with nation building. And for as long as that is the case, then we've got a problem. Indeed, I was in Finland in November, and Rwanda. Yeah, they do have private schools. But in Rwanda, people have a preference for public schools. So the question is, how do we get to that level? Where the quality of education is high and accessible irrespective of the circumstances of your birth. Healthcare. If people can see opportunity through education, if they have no access to reliable healthcare, they are unlikely to take advantage. And so you need to be clear, what is it that we must do that brings healthcare to the people? What kills most Nigerians is actually not cancer or those things that you travel abroad for. It's those malaria, typhoid. In fact, I was surprised when I was told wounds, surface wounds, not well treated, creates a problem. And so we've got to figure out, how do you stimulate the healthcare situation such that people have access to healthcare as part of what it means to be a Nigerian? Because that's the real key question. What does it mean to be a Nigerian? And in my view, going forward, Nigeria's governments have got to do two things. First, the governments at all levels must collaborate. Nigeria, to borrow the words of Professor Soludo, Nigeria must clap with both hands, meaning federal and state governments must spend their resources in the same direction to expedite the opportunities. But it also must mean that the governments must agree that what the private sector can do, let it do. What the private sector is unwilling to do, let it be incentivized to do. And what, despite incentives, the private sector is unable to do, let the government do. And I'm very clear about why I said this. The government should spend its money, inadequate as it is, on human capital. Because that is where we define what it means to be a Nigerian. Let the rest, as much as possible of the rest, to go. Indeed, I'm one of those who takes the view that the size of government in Nigeria is simply too large. Oh, you're very kind. What else? Let me quickly speak to the challenge around opportunity in Nigeria. Challenge number one, Nigeria needs to reduce uncertainty. Uncertainty is a killer of innovation. It is a killer of invention and drive. People need to be able to go to bed, wake up in the morning, know that when they go into bed, the conditions that obtain, if they change in the morning, will not be because government has changed it. If markets change it, well, you respond. But we're in a scenario where sometimes you're not sure what it is that the government aims to do, how it aims to do it, who has responsibility for it. Indeed, I'm one of those who takes the view increasingly that Nigeria's regulatory environment has become such that the regulators are enormously powerful, opaque, and their KPIs do not include the development of the markets over which they superintend. I, therefore, would not be unhappy to see a situation arise where regulators are graded, ranked. And if maybe 2 years in succession you are the last, whoever is the head of it gets fired. It stimulates competition. Those who run consulting firms will tell you, and I run one. The bottom 10% get fired at least every 2 years. Even if your score is 90, as long as you're in the bottom 10%, you go. It allows the opportunity to refresh, but it also allows the stimulation of competition, competitive juices. So for me, certainty, the creation of frameworks where you are sure of what you're doing, the creation of frameworks that protect investors, the creation of frameworks that stimulate Nigeria as a destination for capital. That then takes me to a second point. Nigeria must project itself not just as a global power, or at least intention to become a global, but immediately we need to be able to take advantage of sub-regional and continental opportunities. Nigeria must not be afraid of the opportunity of trading with the rest of Africa. Indeed, I would argue Nigeria must essentially do what the South Africans has achieved with SADC, where half of what you buy almost anywhere in SADC has a South African connection. I see no reason why Nigeria is not that dominant on the West Coast. I honestly see no reason. And in my view, CAFTA, the African Continental Trade Agreement, offers that opportunity to Nigeria to reassert herself. How do I see us doing some of this? Out of the box thinking. We mustn't be afraid of competing. Let me give you an example that I find stimulating. I was saying to a group of friends just this morning that I am told that the bedsheet market in the world is about $64 billion in size. 64 billion. How much of this do we take? Nothing. But imagine this scenario. Just imagine this. We say we want. You look at the value chain and you say, okay, if we are going to do cotton plantations, it'll take 5 years. I don't know what the figure is. Those of you who are agronomists or who understand cotton will know how long it will take. But imagine you then said to the Chinese, why don't you bring cotton? First of all, you have to reseed these plantations. But in the meantime, we will give you a license to import cotton. The cotton will be used to restart the mills. The mills will, of course, employ people in producing fabric. The fabric produced can then be cut up, sewn, well packaged into bed sheets. Even if all Nigeria does annually is, as a colleague of mine says, $5 billion. Imagine that sequence. I didn't say come and reseed the plantations and wait until the plantations are ready before you start earning. I I said, reseed the plantations. In the immediate time, once you've bought the land and you started that, I will give you license as a country to import cotton. But that license must stop the day we agree. In the meantime, you then immediately bring in cotton which can be processed. And so you can see a value chain. Imagine, for example, Nigeria, I think, is about 600,000 or it's either 600,000 or 1 million tons of palm oil that we take. Again, imagine, okay, we need to reseed new plantations. I think that's actually 4 years for the high-yielding strains. In the meantime, I say to you, if you're going to do that, you must immediately, as you start the reseeding, put a refinery, a palm oil refinery. If you put that, I will allow you to import crude palm oil that you can refine. So immediately, again, you begin to earn. Nigeria has to start thinking about how do we afford opportunity to our people on the back of the resources and the capacities that we have. If we think we are going to sit back and not be outward looking, then we will not make the most of the opportunities. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, let me make the point, which is where I started. And that is that, bad as we think the situation is, Nigeria largely remains virgin territory. And it is only those who look who will see. It is only those who ask who will have answers provided for them. And absolutely, as my people say, may we be amongst those who will be deserving of being satisfied. Thank you very much indeed.
So may we be deserving of the person that will be you'd. Thank you very much, sir. Well, now let's go to slide 2. Dr. Salami will take a few questions and he must leave. He'll take 3 questions and he would leave. He has to catch a flight. And I'll just go straight to that first question. The dynamics of FX.
All right. So should I just walk my way through that? Or do you want to choose what you want me to?
Walk your way through that first one first, and I'll...
Okay, and you can decide what happens after.
Yes, right. I have the mic on this side.
Don't read.
No, I won't read. I won't read.
So it says, considering the current economic dynamics and exchange rate, do you think the Naira can sustain the exchange rate? Well, any economist will tell you, yes, the answer is yes. The Naira can sustain the exchange rate. It's a matter of what conditions, in what context, in what circumstance. One of the things we have seen over the last 1 year is a diminution in the size of our reserves. Economics has always been very clear. Demand and supply. So the central bank has created stability for the currency. But the cost of that, everything has a cost. Please let nobody delude anybody that there is something for free. As my people say, even in Freetown, nothing is free. And so to that extent, what we have seen is stability at a cost. Question is, what might be more interesting is, okay, what is the level that that if you continue where we are, the answer is simple. I'm told, and this is now me not being sure, ordinarily I shouldn't say what I'm not sure, but I am told that the central bank has said that provided oil prices stay at a particular level, and I think it's sort of sub 50, and reserves stay at another level, which I think is probably around 30 or thereabouts, that they can maintain the situation. So that's all. So how much have we lost in the last 1 year is what you have to ask. So if we continue, how much might we lose, if we lose any? Because again, geopolitics is playing an interesting role. And by the way, if anybody thinks the Iranians and the Americans, sorry, I think that one is over. We're already seeing oil prices drifting back. Those who are celebrating and waiting for a Middle East war to break out, sorry, it doesn't look likely to happen. So yes, considering the current dynamics, it can. It will cost. And that cost is likely to be reserves.
Okay. All right. Just go to the next one, if you please, because what I was trying to do was protect you.
The person who can answer the next one is sat next to me. Okay. When will the president accede to the finance bill? I am merely part of a team of advisors. Okay. Those who are on the executive side.
Actually, it's not even, the bill is not even before the president to accept. The National Assembly is still harmonizing.
Okay.
So, thank God for that. Good. Where should we be investing now, given the low Naira interest rates obtainable from the banks? Well, as I said to you earlier, many sectors, again, so first of all, the theory of investment is simple. Asset diversification is an important thing, because I have said something about global uncertainties and the like. And so you need to diversify your asset. Naira income, dollar income, whatever you like. But you need a diversity in your portfolio to sustain your position. That's the first thing. Now, so where should you be investing? I will only tell you where I would invest. If you invest there and you get burnt, don't come back and talk to me. By the way, I do mean this seriously when I say, because I have invested and I've been burnt badly. So, but I'm clear about a couple of things. One, technology offers a huge range of opportunities, multi-sector, multi-dimensional, multi-time. So for me, technology is a major area. Agriculture, I told you. Anyhow, 400 million people in an additional 200 million people in another 30 years, got to be fed, got to be housed. So that Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And by the way, those who wrote this question, where should we be investing? Are you investing for the short term or are you investing for the long term? If you're investing for the short term, sorry, you can go to the stock market even though I'm not there. And I ain't going there, by the way. So why? I'm an Ijebu boy now. And Ijebu boy is the one that you don't control. You look at it well. So for me, my own personal investment preferences is not in financial markets. So that's all I'm saying. I'm not saying the stock market is bad or personally, that's my own way. So agriculture, technology are spaces that I think, you really are major opportunities. Two others that I will add. One is education. The other is healthcare. Look, if you get micro pensions right, and that stimulates healthcare, it is the next big thing, potentially the next big thing that could happen. Do you think the Naira will be devalued in the nearest future? I don't know. How near is the nearest future? If it is tomorrow, it ain't going to be devalued tomorrow. What else? The World Bank predicts growth of 2.1% for Nigeria in 2020. It predicts greater than 6% growth for West Africa and the region in 2020. How can Nigeria increase growth in 2020? Nigeria is in a, and by the way, this has to be my final question before I disappear,
yes.
So forgive me.
Yes.
Nigeria is in a very interesting position on growth. For whatever reason, we can argue that we entered into a recession. We're coming out of a recession. Exit from a recession anywhere is always gradual. However, what Nigeria now needs to do is find ways of stimulating rapid growth. I'm one of those who takes a view that if Nigeria can say over the next 2 years or thereabout, end up with 5% growth per annum and sustain that for a period not less than, say, 6-7 years, then the kind of possible transformation that we could see on the back of a couple of other things. But so in terms of growth, they're now saying, what do you need to do? Me, there are probably 3 things that we need to do. 1, got to figure out this power conundrum. We really got to figure out this power conundrum. Irony or problem is this: ain't going to solve power in 3 years. But if we build a platform where people can invest, then you can certainly get to your 15, 20 megawatt kind of power position in 3 years. However, for you to do even that, you need to sort gas out. And that you may need to sort out like now, so that in 3 years' time, it can enable GenCos to deliver power. You can't say it's in 3 years' time that you're going to be sorting that out. So that's the first thing. The second thing is our agric has got to be more efficient. Okay? And the third thing is Nigeria's manufacturing must, by force, anyhow, become more efficient, command a larger share of regional markets, command a larger share of continental markets. Now, what is this saying? 2 things. 1, if you're going to command a larger share of external markets, your own domestic market must be safe. And the point about power is partly a cost efficiency matter. Currently, I am told, and I don't have the figure, and I'm not sure who does, that we think we are currently doing about 4 gigawatts of public power and about between 20 and 30 gigawatts of private power. Now, the cost of that alone undermines you. Secondly, I am told Nigeria moves 200 million tons of freight by road and less than 100,000 tons of freight by rail. Again, it doesn't, I keep feeling for those who run the works ministry, there is no way on that configuration that the roads can be any better than what they currently are. Doesn't matter what you do. And so these are certainly 2 things that you need to do. The third thing that I think you need to do is fix human capital. And the human capital fix is 2 levels. Education, you've got to fix. But the more that is fixable in the short run that could stimulate growth is healthcare. Now, I have some interesting ideas about how you can stimulate public, what do you call those things? Primary healthcare centers, using them on the back of technology. In December, a friend and I sat and we were discussing my ideas, and he just said, okay, call this number. So I called the number. Guess what's on the other end? There's a guy on the other end who's answering me. It was a video call, who says, what's your name, blah, blah, blah. So what's the problem? So I discussed the problem. So he says, okay, hold on, and passes me to a doctor who's not in the house, who on the back of technology is somewhere else, but I can now talk to him. He tells me what it is that. So in other words, technology may begin to help us, because part of when you say to people in healthcare, I say we don't have enough doctors. And I'm beginning to think, yeah, we don't, by the way, and we don't. But technology might just be able to help us, because a key thing about Nigerian growth is leapfrog. We cannot do incremental change. We have got to do leapfrog change. And leapfrog change is going to be about some uncommon things that we did not do. And in my view, which is why I emphasize technology, artificial intelligence, big data, robotics, Internet of Things, fourth industrial revolution, that is, in my view, what really provides Nigeria a major platform for moving off. Final thing that Nigeria must do: the federal, the states, and the local governments must share a vision of what our priorities should be, and their spending and policies must be aligned to enable us make progress. So, to the pastor, to members of the congregation and their guests, I really do thank you very much for this opportunity. And as I said at the beginning, may this year be the best yet for you and yours. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Dr. Doyin Salami. We have a surprise for you. Dr. Salami has left us with 30 minutes before he goes to Abuja. We have somebody who will give us his perspective on this. I call on Mr. Kunle Elebute. It's a surprise on him. It's a surprise on him. If it's bad, hold Pastor Ben. Mr. Kunle Elebute is the senior partner of KPMG Africa. He's the chairman of KPMG Africa.
I wait for Dr. Salami to go to Abuja and I talk. Please go. Well, how should I do this? Should I answer the questions?
Give us some perspective on some of the things that he said, and then you can also answer some questions. Okay, we have 30 minutes.
All right.
And you can take some more.
Yeah, let me give you my own perspective. I think one of the challenges that we've always had, and I want to talk a bit more high level, he tried to break it down into where the outlook is and where the opportunities are. But let's just dimension it in different perspective. The big challenge we've always had is that there's always been a misalignment between fiscal policy and monetary policy. I'm an economist just like he is as well, so I have to use my background of where I'm coming from. I've always said, in various places that monetary policy over the years in Nigeria has been in response to what I call fiscal rascality. Where government spending just goes out of whack completely, and that government spending is not directed towards growing the economy. You remember very well, some of you were probably, if you're in active service for as long as some of us have been, at the point that Yar'Adua became president, between the excess crude account and the reserves, I think excess crude was something about $40 billion. The reserves were something like $20 billion plus. And I've always said in my mind that even if the federal government just took their own share of excess crude and spent that money on building new refineries, expanding the transmission grid to be able to take much more power capacity than we have today, and doing things that would have helped us grow the economy, we won't be where we are. But let's park that anyway. Second thing also is that during the time we had very high oil prices, we were a consumption spending economy. Nigerians just were consuming so much that we weren't at least invest in that money. So we've now come to the point where now we have to invest. And there's no way you can invest if you don't have savings. Okay? Even as an individual, you want to own a home or start a business, you have to save first of all for you to invest. You want your children to go to very good schools, you have to save for you to invest. And if you don't have that, like Doyin said, many of the things we're looking at for us to be able to have an improvement in our lifestyles, for us to have improvement in our business, it depends on the personal decisions we make. It can't only just be government policy alone. So government policy can be bad, good, or excellent. You can have excellent government policies where you make bad personal decisions. You're not going to make progress at all. Okay? So I'm just trying to link back to what he said about the fact that a lot of times we just fold our arms and we just complain about what is happening around us, but we don't do anything about it. So when you now look at the areas of the economy that have been able to become resilient in spite of what has happened in the last few years, whether it is in the music industry, whether it is in Nollywood, whether it's in fintechs and the guys in Yaba, for example, you get a point. These guys are just doing things because they're not complaining that the economy is not doing well. Like somebody said in some analysis I read some years ago about entrepreneurship in Africa, that our entrepreneurs in Africa are doing it because they really want to be entrepreneurs or because they want to survive. Okay? But survival is much more important than just being an entrepreneur. And in some cases, when you look at the guys who are in the music industry, They are talented, okay? They're talented, but many people are entering that industry because they want to survive. Because if you look at the backgrounds of some of the most successful, entertainment people we have today, they come from really, really poor backgrounds. And if not for what the talent they went to harness, they probably won't be anywhere where they are today. Okay? The other day, one guy came to my office, and he's big in organizing concerts. And he said to me, apart from this organizing this concert, I have a new idea. I'm aggregating what they call Afro beats, not beat, Afro beats. Okay? And I'm working with some guys in the US to put it on Netflix. So the only way the content will be accessed will be through Netflix. What does that mean? It's global. So people are thinking, people are being more creative, people are being a lot more innovative, people are being more dynamic, because that is what the environment warrants us to do. Now, will we ever go back to an economy where we'll be growing 7% per annum, pumping oil at $100 a day? I don't believe so. Can we get back to an economy where growing at 7-8% per annum? Yes, we can. But we will not get there because we have $100 a barrel. We'll get there because we have a lot more innovative people in Nigeria who are doing things to be able to break the barrier, the sound barrier. So, the outlook is as Doyin Salami gave to us. The sectors is as Doyin Salami gave to us. But the truth is that how many of us want to go and access those sectors? Agriculture is a tough place to be in, but everybody here, okay, you're fasting for 50 days. When you break your fast, you still have to eat. Let's put that aside, okay? But there are many people we have to feed in this country on a daily basis. There are people who have to wear shoes on a daily basis. There are people who have to wear clothes on a daily basis. There are people who need, even if it's just basic education on a daily basis. There are people who need basic health care. So let's go back to the brass tacks and look at the things that we can look. 15, 20 years ago, there weren't many pharmacy chains around. Okay? So right now, the two major pharmacy chains that we see visibly, either in Lagos or outside Lagos, are what? MedPlus and HealthPlus. Those chains are owned and led by female pharmacists. I know two of them very well, but the MedPlus one in particular says she employs 120 qualified pharmacists. Because every store has to have at least minimum 2 pharmacies. Okay? But they didn't just wake up and say, I want to do pharmacy chain. It was not, when they were in university doing pharmacy, they didn't say they were going to do pharmacy chain. But they got into the business, got into the sector, saw a gap in the market, and went after it. And the pharmacy businesses that I see today are very, very different. There are small stores, there are big stores. There's a 24-hour pharmacy in Lekki. 24 hours. So there's a big need. So you've got to find something that of need that people will always continue to patronize you. Okay? And if you're in a job, for example, like Doyin said, if you happen to be in a company where you are most likely going to be, extinct in the next year or two, either by virtue of competition or government policy, then you better dust your CV and start looking to move to where there's going to be growth and opportunity. So that's just by the way. But when it comes to sectors, like he said, agribusiness or agriculture is the biggest part of the economy. It's become much more of an agribusiness than just not just farming. And in our own business, for example, we did a study on rice a few months ago. For the first time, we did a full study on rice. And to do that, we had to scan the environment and speak to the guys in the rice business, understand the rice value chain, understand the guys who are growing paddy rice, the guys who have mills, and so on and so forth. And after we launched the study, and we started getting requests for interviews, so we started getting calls from other players in the sector who said, oh, by the way, your study did not cover this area, or that area, that area, that area. And I went to a session, for example, where a fund that invests into agribusinesses, where I was the speaker for the investor forum. And some guy who had a massive rice mill in the East said when they run their business plan, they thought the price of rice would be X. And on the back of that, they made the investment, and also then therefore went to go and raise money. And then they closed the border. But when they did their model 2 years ago, they never envisaged the border would be closed. All of a sudden, the price that they looked selling their rices has gone up by 30-40%. So for them, the border closure is positive. But also the others who the border closure is negative. Because there are Nigerian businesses today who don't necessarily export themselves, but they sell their products to those people who take the products across the border. I know one business, for example, outside Lagos, in a confectionery space. Okay, sweets, chewing gums, that kind of stuff. 1/3 of their production goes across the border of Nigeria into West Africa. Okay, so, for example, they may be affected by the border closure, I'm also sure. So the thing about it is that there's a lot of space in this economy that is not tapped into yet. And unfortunately for us, we've gone the easy route of saying we're going banking and financial services, banking. We're going to oil and gas. And many people who invested in those areas got their hands burnt. Okay, because banking is not child's play. Yeah. Okay, we had a policy in our firm that if an institution didn't have the right governance, okay, what does governance mean? In other words, if the board couldn't fire the CEO, we won't touch that institution. We won't work with them. We won't be the auditor. If the board couldn't fire the CEO, and there are cases where the board couldn't fire the CEO. Yeah, but the CEO just did what they liked, and the board was just a rubber stamp. Those banks, where they? They're gone. Okay. Doesn't mean there aren't still some of them standing today, but if they're still standing today, I can tell you they won't be around for much longer. Okay? So those sectors are key. As you said, agribusiness is a key sector. Telecoms and IT is a big sector. IT in particular. The whole fintech, digital space, and so on and so forth, a big sector. You know the guys who do the OPay that does the Okada, for example, that's only a slice of the business. OPay's business is actually agent banking, and they have over 100,000 agents across Nigeria. They raised $120 million from a Chinese investor last year, October. And 2 years earlier, they raised $50 million from investors. 100,000 agent banks across Nigeria. That's bigger than the next largest commercial bank. I think it's First Bank that has 40,000 agents. So this is a non-banking business that has more financial agents than a bank. Okay? And then, of course, in the Okada space with their OPay Okada, for example, they actually make more money in Ibadan than they do in Lagos. Because Lagos, as you know, it's a no man's land. So there are lots of spaces and opportunities but you have to think really hard, and you have to be creative, and you have to really, really find your space. Now, the reason why I think this is important is that even if government policy tomorrow, okay, for sake of argument, if the government decided to actually, try and develop a really robust consumer credit sector, just think out of the box here, so that all of us here could get 20, 25-year mortgages, okay, at 6-7%, right? Many people will then be able to get housing, okay, at fairly decent rates, such that even if you are paying your mortgage, it will be more than the rent you are paying today to a landlord. But the house will be your own, whether it's an apartment or a house. What would that do? It will suddenly be an explosion, okay, in the housing sector. Okay? The guys who are ready for that explosion is cement industry. Is anybody else ready for that explosion? To make roofing sheets or tiles? Do we even have the artisans who can even, today, if you are building a home in this market, do you have enough artisans to even lay tiles when you're building your home? No. Okay? The windows, the doors, the furniture, the consumer electronics that you need to put into the homes, we're not ready. We're not ready for many things that will happen if the right economic policies are put in place. Okay. Will they ever come? My answer is, I believe they will. Will they come this year or next year? They'll come fairly soon. Okay? But the thing about this is readiness. Readiness. You must be ready for when those things will happen, when they will crystallize. Okay? You talk about the bedsheet market, for example. The bedsheet market and the garment industry are very similar. So in Nigeria, we have a textile industry, which already the Chinese have finished. Okay? Because it was cheaper to bring in 5 yards of African prints that were selling in Kano, okay, for 500 naira. They could bring the same 5 years of African prints from China, truck it to Kano, and sell for 150 naira. So, competitive? No. Garment industry? Oh, massive. Bangladesh, its main export is garment industry. Huge. Most of you who travel and go abroad, for example, and go to some of those low-end stores in Europe and Dubai, all the garments there are made in Bangladesh. And the skill set level in Bangladesh is not much more different from Nigeria. So what we haven't been able to do in Nigeria is crack the garment industry. Because all of us who wear our local African prints, we have a tailor around the corner who we give it to. And we give the tailor something to sew. You say, I want it in 1 week. And after 5 days, you say, oh God, I didn't have light for the last 3 days. Your clothes can be ready for next week. And that's reality. It doesn't have light. Okay? So until we get to the point where we have, mass-produced stuff, at a scale that's affordable for everybody, and even if it's low margin, but it's large volumes, we're not going to be a major player at all in any way, not just globally, but even in our own sub-region. Because when you talk about the Africa Free Trade Agreement, the guys who are ready for this, for Africa Free Trade Agreement, beyond South Africa, that's dominated Southern Africa, is Morocco. Okay? Morocco has one of the biggest phosphate companies in the world. What do you need phosphate for? You blend urea with phosphate to make NPK for fertilizer. Okay. They are desperate to come and do phosphate in Nigeria. They even imagined that could we build a gas pipeline from here to Morocco so that they could tap into our cheap gas. Okay. They are also big in the car manufacturing industry. They are big in agriculture. What is their target market? Southern Europe. Now, with that kind of competitive positioning, they believe that they can actually also come into Africa. Do you know they've applied to join ECOWAS? Morocco is not in West Africa, but these guys are daunting. They said they want to join ECOWAS because they want to access to the ECOWAS market and to dump their products in Nigeria. I have a client, for example, in the consumer industry. We have a client in the consumer industry, and the MD spoke to me and said, look, there's a multinational that's in Nigeria who is our competitor. Okay? That same multinational has a subsidiary also in Morocco. Okay? If they allow them to enter ECOWAS, that's competing subsidiary in Morocco. If they export into Nigeria, I'll close my business down. Big multinational with 2 or 3 factories in Nigeria will shut down our business because we won't be able to compete unit cost with that similar business in Morocco. Doing exactly the same thing. Soaps, toothpaste, usual stuff. So, we can't imagine what we can achieve if we do the right things in Nigeria. Now, are we going to do the right things in Nigeria? Well, to be honest with you, if you look at the Economic Advisory Council with Doyin Salami, who are known for a long time, and the people who are on that committee, I know that all they will do is telling the government what to do right. Okay? And they'll keep on hammering on those things. They won't change their position. No. But for how long will they tell government that government will not listen? I think it will be embarrassing for the government if they keep on telling the government and after 1 year they say, all right guys, we've tried our best and we are going. My suspicion is that they will take a number of the things they're asking them to do so that these guys will remain advising them. That's my own suspicion. Okay? I won't say more than that. All right. So let's try and answer some of the questions that you had up there. That question of how do Nigeria prevent itself from dumping activities one after comes in practice, and how will it incentivize local manufacturers? It's a very good question. We need to have a strategy for after. We need to say to ourselves, what are the things today? So maybe part of the closing the border is our strategy for after. Because if you look at some of the neighboring countries around us who don't have any kind of capacity, they say that the volume of rice that they import into Benin Republic, okay? If everybody eats rice, breakfast, lunch, and dinner for the whole year, they won't finish consuming that rice. So we know that rice going into Benin is not destination Benin. Okay? Right. So the point therefore is that those guys who are importing stuff, who want to dump stuff, if I had the government, I say, come, there's a market here. Not only for you to be able to produce in the local market, but based on our exchange rates and our cost of labor, you can actually come and produce and also export. That's one way to do it. Okay? Another way to do it also is to look at the existing manufacturing capacity in the market and say to them, what incentives do they need to do to expand beyond just local market for export? Okay? Because if you don't do those things, we won't be competitive. So what incentives do they need to do? Tax incentives. They need cheap electricity. They need cheap land, for example. But the biggest problem, of course, in manufacturing also today is logistics and distribution. Moving it from point of the factory gate to the port or to wherever you want to serve the customer. I'll give you one example. In Côte d'Ivoire, as you know, they're an agricultural commodity country, and they export actually most of what they produce: cocoa, coffee, bananas, pineapples. And most of what they produce is either middle of the country or north of the country. So they have to truck most of the stuff they export down to the south to the port. Now, apparently, this is what I hear. I don't know if I'm right, but it's what I hear, that there's a policy, government policy, that if a truck that is carrying an export commodity to the port in Côte d'Ivoire, and the policeman stops the truck for a traffic violation, okay? The rule is that the policeman should escort that truck to the port to discharge the produce for export before he can arrest the driver. And if he arrests the driver and keeps that truck longer than he ought to, then the policeman is violating the country's laws, because it's preventing the economic activity to happen. Okay? Now, we all know what it takes to move something from Apapa Port to Oregun. Not even from Apapa Port to Ilorin or Apapa Port to Onitsha. And what the truck driver must go through just to be able to deliver what they need to do. That is even, just even on all the various checkpoints. But because of that kind of bad behavior too, you have drivers who are carrying cargo from here to Enugu. When they get to Shagamu, they will drop the cargo in a warehouse, quickly go and pick something else, and run that errand for their pocket, and then go back and pick the one they're supposed to collect, and they take it to Enugu. Oh, it happens. And instead of doing 3 days on the road, they spend 5 days on the road. But anyway, as an aside, so there's a lot that needs to be done. Do we know what we need to do? I believe so. The current Ministry of Trade and Investment, I know that they have put together what is required for them to be able to make the local industry, attractive. I know man on his own also is putting together what they need to do to be attractive. Now, after doing all that, next thing is, will we then be able to, craft the policies to open up the sectors for these guys to be competitive? It's another question. We can't answer right now, but let's see 12 months from now whether or not we are ready for that. Do you want to run the questions? Who's operating this thing? Okay. Where should we be investing now, given the low interest rates obtained from banks? I think Doyin gave us a number of ideas. Agribusiness clearly is an area of investing. It comes with its own risks, but it will give you much better interest rates than banks. I hear that banks' fixed deposit rate now is 1% from this year, 1%. I think that if you invest also in technology companies, if you invest in even invest in yourself, for example, you're probably going to get a higher return from your better knowledge than give your money to a bank. Okay? Will the bank be devalued in the nearest future? I think Doyin answered that question. And the current economic dynamics and foreign rates, do you think Naira can sustain exchange rate? And that's the same thing. Mr. President, I think Pastor Ben answered the last one. Any other question? Okay, it's all about Naira devaluation. You must have a number of people in this church who want to arbitrage the exchange rate. They want us to tell them when to devalue so they can go and speculate now. I think, is that all? No other questions? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. Fortunately, the coup plotters don't get shot these days again, so we've successfully pulled that on you. But there was a question there that someone put up, and it says it's for the DG budget. So lest I be accused of docking, and it had to do with the breakdown of the $30 billion foreign loan request. First of all, let me clarify what. In 2016, the then Minister of Finance sent through the President to the National Assembly a request for a medium-term borrowing plan totaling $29.6 billion. The 8th National Assembly said they weren't going to consider that. They would rather look at the requests on an itemized basis, on a specific basis. And so they set aside that request. But between then and now, they had actually approved already out of the $29.6 billion, about 6.9 billion. So out of that original 29.6, only $22.7 billion haven't been drawn. But strangely, somebody pulled up the same document and sent to the National Assembly, again reading $29.6 billion. And that's why it read 2016 to 2018. You can't be seeking approval for a 2016 to 2018 borrowing plan in 2019. So what needs to happen now is that plan has to be updated, and they're working on that, and then sent to the National Assembly for a 2020 to 2022 borrowing plan. But in terms of the composition of it, out of that 29.6, over $17 billion was for rail. Okay. And then about another $5 billion or so was for Mambila power. So between rail and power, that's the bulk of, things. And guess what? Nigerians in Nigeria, government borrowing has become a sort of, it's acquired negative connotation. But the honest truth is that it's inevitable. If we hope, looking at everyone here, to see, development. You heard Dr. Salami, and this was based. That National Infrastructure Master Plan is being updated now. But when the plan was originally done about 10 years ago, we envisaged that we needed to spend $100 billion on infrastructure annually. That's Nigeria needs to spend, not government needs to spend. That plan indeed envisaged that government would only spend about a third of that, and the balance will come from the private sector. We have grossly underspent. The federal government's, between the federal government and the state government's budgets, in all that time, at best, you look at $60 billion on everything, not on infrastructure. On the average, between the governments, in all that, in the last 10 years, they've probably spent about 10% only of that $60 billion annually on infrastructure. The average annual infrastructure spend has probably averaged maybe about $5 billion, $6 billion. That's a long shot. That's government. The private sector has also spent something, especially in the technology area, all of the investment in broadband, in fiber optics and all of that, and even some of the private investment in power. But nevertheless, we have grossly underspent. And so our infrastructure stock, as infrastructure investment as a percentage of GDP, is extremely low. We can't, it's been estimated by a World Bank study that if we raised our infrastructure, because people are asking how can we get our GDP up, if we raised the quality of our infrastructure to match that of Mauritius. Mauritius has the best infrastructure on the continent. If we raise the quality of our infrastructure to match that of Mauritius, so I'm not talking about to match European or whatever other standards, it could add about 2.5% annually to our GDP growth rate. Okay. But we're not going to, achieve that unless Nigerians come to terms with the fact that we have to pay for the infrastructure, and government, if we're waiting for government to build all the infrastructure that we need, our children, by the time our children's children come, maybe, they will achieve that. And that's if somebody does something to check population growth. Because if we continue to grow at this rate, then maybe the infrastructure will actually get, poorer. Therefore, guys, we've got to come to terms with it. That we, for those who live in this Lekki corridor, for instance. I worked with Lagos State government. How are we doing for time? Before I get carried away and start telling long stories.
Pastor, you have the mic.
I worked for Lagos government. At the time this decision was done, the government came to terms with the fact that given the fact that this was the fastest developing corridor on the continent and even, globally, with one of the fastest, government's resources could not match that pace in terms of infrastructure development. And so it was determined that the best thing was to bring the private sector to invest in the road. And so the concession, and that concession was, that concession by LCC won global acclaim, won so many awards globally and was, highly rated, except here. They was continually vilified. If we had let that stand, by now, not only will this road be in a better state, you can see it has fallen back in terms of maintenance standards and quality since government bought it back. But by now, the coastal road will have been built because that was part of the concession. When people refused to pay and the concession was aborted, someone will say, yeah, but what do you mean people refuse to pay? Are we not just paying here? No, no. First of all, in all the years this thing there's only been one increase. This is an investment that people made. At the time they made this investment, and the bulk of the money that was invested here was provided by foreign banks, by Standard Bank of South Africa and, was this Australian bank, Macquarie, yes. They provided the funding for it. Devaluation has occurred. These guys needed to protect their investment. But anyway, the point that I make today, now we are locked in a debate. NEC, recently, Michelle, please sit here. Recently, NEC issued a minor, whatever, for approval for a minor tariff review. And everybody is up in arms. No, we're not going to pay. We're not going to pay more for power. The reality is that unless we're prepared to pay more for power, not much is going to change in terms of power. Because the investment that is required isn't going to happen. Even though the dynamics of power and telecom are different, and as some people argue, it's easier with telecom. But if you recall, in the early days of telecom, thank God that we had a strong regulator. Remember, how much more expensive it was, 50 naira per minute or whatever. The first set of SIM cards, we all had to pay like 20,000 naira or something like that, whatever. Eventually, when the markets take control, now everybody is saying, oh, government, sack the, the discos. They don't know what they're doing. Take it back. That's the preponderant view of Nigerians and the Labour Union and National Assembly. We've been under tremendous pressure to sack the discos and take back If government was doing a good job of NEPA, we would probably not have needed the privatization in the first place. But we are not. on this continent, even South Africa, much more efficient economy and all of that. ESCOM is struggling. They are a power company. We need to leave power in the hands of the private sector, and we have to be prepared to pay more. For those of us, self-generation of power, which most of us, in one form or the other, when you add the cost of your Better Pass My Neighbor, of inverter, of all this, and or need costs, it's far more than what the private sector. There are some estates in Lagos now where they're coming to whatever, making a reasonable whatever and saying, hey, let's do a deal. Give us 18 hours of power. We will pay more. And that's living. So I wasn't supposed to be the speaker today. I went from answering one question to...
Well, please, let's give a round of applause to Pastor Ben still. I think we always take for granted, the fact that we have PB as our pastor. Just like we always take this kind of events for granted as well. If this was held, first of all, the quality of our facilitators would match any business school in the world. Any. Now, if we come back to Lagos Business School, which is the foremost, you would pay nothing less than if they're fair, they would ask you to pay 50,000 naira. Okay, 250 I'm hearing, but let's say 50,000, 75, 100,000. I can guarantee you that easy. But people will not come. And when people come, they probably will not listen. Even when they listen and take notes, they will not act. I don't think I've heard anything new today. I've heard so many things. I've heard what's happening in Agric. I've heard distribution. I've heard manufacturing. But it's for us to take these things and go and act on them. Many times we're looking up to the federal government. We're looking up to just one man, one president, to solve the problems. We've forgotten the governor. We've forgotten, many other things that govern us. And some of these things, we just need to listen and act progressively. Dr. Doyin Salami said a lot of things that is really left to us to act on. Some of those things that they have told us to go and do not require huge capital. It's just for us to listen, to know, and then to act. And what we have done, and what we have been doing for the last 6 years, is to provide access to knowledge that you need to know and then to act on, free of charge. I think you should give us a round of applause for that. Okay, now we're going on to the next sessions. For financial services, digital financial services, it will take place here. Mr. Mitchell Elegba is here, MD CEO of InterSwitch. Technology goes to the third floor. Mr. Dapo Adewale will be there, his partner in EY. Creatives will go to the ground floor. Mrs. Bolanle Austin Peters will be there. She'll be talking to creatives, media, and entertainment. Thank you very much and happy deliberations. Okay, well, later today we'll have ease of doing business. Ease of doing business will take place here. Then after that, we'll have a short lunch break. Okay, I should have said something about the lunch break. Now, first of all, the Redeemed Christian Church of God globally should be fasting. And we find that other churches are actually going through some kind of spiritual process in fasting or the other. And in fact, my wife and I were saying this morning that I really wonder what's going to happen after this fast, because almost every church that we know is fasting. Now, we have still provided food, but at your cost. So if for whatever reason you're not going through the spiritual exercise, you can buy food at the ground floor. There will be that's during the lunch break. There will be a spread there, and you will have to pay for that. After the lunch break, we will then have angel investing by Mr. Kolaino on the 3rd floor. We will have MSME financing in the main auditorium. I mean, that's one that didn't make it into marketing. We have a representative of Central Bank talking to sources of finance. After that, we will have a prayer session here, because that's really the main session. Because after knowing all those things that we need to know, then we can pray and pray ahead, for this year and many other things. We've been hearing 2020, 2020, 2020, 2020. Now 2020 is here. It is time to take action. So, happy deliberations. Mitchell is here. Financial services, digital financial services is here. Technology, 3rd floor. Creatives, ground floor. Happy deliberations. For Mitchell?
Yes, please.